spoken very highly of Paintsville, and in the interactions that I've had with Brother Johnny and his family, we love them very much, even if he did play for the Giants. I am a Dodgers fan, so I'm flying high right now, I'm telling you. It's been the greatest couple of weeks for me. I wore 3 straight championship shirts in a row, and I thought I'd bring my LA pin, and I thought, well, I just won't do that to Brother Johnny. I'll be nice, and so I decided not to do that. But I am thankful to be here and tell you about the thing that I love the most, and that's preaching the gospel and having the chance to guide young men aged 18 to 80, that is the age range that we accept at MSOP, to be able to be gospel preachers. My job is as a recruiter. So basically, I travel the country and let people know about the work that we're doing, and then I also work in the digital promotions realm. And so digital promotions is really social media and digital evangelism, if you will. Before we begin with the actual report of the school, this is still a Bible class period, and so I always like to do what I call a blended report. I know many people sometimes will just come and report on the work, and I don't think there's anything sinful with that. I just prefer to also give some biblical instruction during a Bible class period. So let me take your attention to 2 Timothy chapter 4, and we'll look at verses 1 through 5 together today. This is obviously, as you can see on the screen, our theme verse for MSOP is found within these 5 verses. It's 2 Timothy 4 and verse 2. And as you and I look at these verses together, we'll notice how Paul, through the inspired pen, guides Timothy, a younger man, in what preaching the gospel truly looks like. In the first place, we're told by Paul that he charges Timothy to do this. I charge you, therefore, before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. This isn't something that Paul says, you know, it'd be a nice thing if you would do this. It would be a great thing if you would do what I'm about to tell you is something that would be a good idea. You know, sometimes people will give us advice and they'll say, for best results, I recommend doing it this way. That's what's always given me the best results, and that would be good. Would it be wise to say in certain matters when it comes to law, for best results, I recommend driving 15 miles over the speed limit? Would that go over well? It doesn't matter what I recommend if there's an actual law behind it, right? And if I'm charged by my government to follow the law of the land, then I have to go the speed limit, and I have to follow the laws of the land. And I can't have anybody recommend to me then to do anything other than that. What Paul says here is not just a charge from Paul. He says, I do this before the Lord and Jesus Christ. I'm doing this before God and the Son of God, indicating that this is, again, not Paul's recommendation, but a requirement. This has been lost in so many places, unfortunately. We have forgotten that gospel preaching is not based on what I think. It's based on what Jesus and the Father have mandated. It is based on fact. Truth comes from the Word of God, and when I preach anything other than that, I'm not preaching the Word of God. And watch how Paul then shifts into this, because he says, these are the ones who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. So here's the charge, Timothy. Preach the word. Be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all longsuffering and doctrine. Now that verse in and of itself is packed with sermons. First and foremost, we're told exactly what to preach, the word. Not what I think on a subject, not what I hope people would appreciate and value enough to accept, but the word. Is our country right now struggling with facts? Yes, absolutely they are. And it is so frustrating at times to see when absolute truth is showcased via facts and information, and people will still say, I'm rejecting that. Well, I'm told to preach the word. So if it's not in this book, I can't preach it. If it's not taught by this book, I cannot preach it. I have to have this to back me up. But then it gives us a secondary thought. to be instant, in season, and out of season. Someone was talking about before class began, it's deer season now. What does that mean? It means now you're allowed to do what? You can hunt. But when it's not deer season, are you allowed to? No, they've got a stipulation put on that. You've got to fall within the lines of the season, right? Well, preaching has no season. It's when they want to hear it, when it's in season, if you will, and even when they don't want to hear it, when it's out of season. And there are plenty of places that unfortunately they only really preach when it's in season. When people are ready to accept it, excited about what the Word of God says, they'll preach it. If there starts to be some push and pullback and kind of initial fighting against what is said, they hightail it away from that and they don't talk about it anymore. That's not preaching. And it's certainly not being instant, in season, and out of season. Then he gets to the types of preaching that is required. Now, the word that is used in the King James Version, reprove, it's not really a word that we use as much today. The New King James Version has that word as convince. And I believe that that is the greatest word to put there, because I have to be able to convince you and convince others that something is either true or not true, right? If we were talking about a court of law, does it ever fly for a lawyer to stand up and say, he did it? Okay, how do you know? Well, I just told you. That's not enough, is it? You have to convince the jury and or the judge, depending on the case, that what you believe happened can be proven, at least with enough evidence to convince people, yes, that's the truth. Now, can sometimes people use things to convince people of stuff that is inaccurate? Yeah, that can happen. And if that's true, that's where we get the term cross-examination, where I have the chance to then get up and ask questions to cross-examine what has been said and see if it's factual. One of the greatest disservices that has ever happened in the church has been that there have been too many young people and too many adults who have sat in pews and heard preachers preach, this is wrong. Well, tell us why. Well, I just told you it's wrong. Now we're moving on. That's not convincing. Convincing means that I have to show I bear the burden of proof. I show you that it's right or show you that it's wrong. If I tell you your entire life from kindergarten to the end of your high school days that it's true, just take my word for it. When you go face that first person who has some information that you've never heard before, how are you going to be able to convince them that they're right or wrong? If all you ever have is, well, my preacher said. The word convince here is not used in such a way to indicate that it's based on a trust me statement. It is a building of trust. And so I convince people that it is either true or untrue. That's the burden that a preacher has. And so there are plenty of sermons that have to be preached with a convincing aspect. And so let me say this and I'll move on to the next one. Doctrine deserves its day in court. I cannot just tell you that it's wrong without showcasing why it's wrong. And that's not because we're trying to be mean or unkind. It's simply because I want to equip every single member with the kill file, if you will, for each doctrine that is contrary to what this book teaches. That's my responsibility as a gospel preacher. And it's not my responsibility because that's how I feel. That's what Paul said I have to be. Now, the second word is stronger, rebuke. But still, even then, we have people that take that word and go a bridge farther than I think the Holy Spirit intended for us to. The idea of rebuking here is not rebuking the person to the point that they feel worthless. It's rebuking the sin. It's rebuking the thing that keeps them from Christ. And we've had an old phrase that has been used throughout our time and history: love the sinner, hate the sin, right? But sometimes, unfortunately, people indicate to us that we actually hate the sinner and the sin. That can never be said of the Church of Christ. It should never be able to be said. I should be able to look at someone and see their soul and still be able to tell them, I love you enough to tell you the truth, and what you're doing is harmful to you. When my son misbehaves, as a father, I have to get involved. I cannot allow him to just be disobedient without training him. But it should never be said of a father that when his son is disciplined, that the father hates his son. There are plenty of scriptures that teach that very fact. And so when I look at disciplining a child, I have to do it with as much love as I can possibly show, so he knows, even though you're in trouble, Daddy still loves you. Well, if that's true for a father and a son, would it not also need to be even more true for those that don't even have that bond connecting them? You see, blood connects me to my son, and he sees me every day and can tell, Daddy's upset right now, but he probably has good reason because of what I've done. But he knows that there are plenty of times where his father's not upset. He's happy. He's excited. He praises him. Well, if that's the case, what happens if somebody outside of the body sees you or sees me acting in a way that is unkind and hateful? Yes, rebuking is in the Bible, and you can't deny that it's important, but I have to rebuke the sin. And the hope and prayer behind that is that when I do that, I can do it in such a way that convinces the person, I love you. And that's why I don't want you struggling with this. That's why I don't want you doing this. Will it sometimes require a rebuke of the person? Certainly there are cases where you might have to, as David was told by the prophet, you're the one. It's you. You are the problem here. You're the one I'm talking about. You have an issue. But you also have to be careful that we don't treat every single person every single day the exact same way. And I know that more now, having had multiple children in our household. My daughter, who turns 3 in March, is a completely different animal, if you will, than my son, who's almost 7. And it takes a lot more of a different approach with her than I can with him. Right now with her, if I tell her not to do something, you would think that I hit her upside the head with a 2x4. She falls on the ground and begins wailing. She's so upset that Daddy said no. My son doesn't act that way though. And so with her, I'll pick her up and I'll sit her on my lap and I'll say, Daddy loves you, but you can't do that right now. Or I love you, but it is nap time. I know that's horrible and that's terrible, but you have to do this. But there are times where even though she's only 2 and almost 3, I can still say to her, Audie Lynn, you know better than that. And she'll look at me with that understanding look. And I'm rebuking what she's doing, but I'm not trying to cut her down and tear her down as a person. There has to be a balance of love, and that's required by the Scripture here when we talk about doctrine. Then the third one, he ends with exhortation. The best example of this that I always enjoy talking about is Hebrews chapter 12. You know, Hebrews 11 showcases over and over again all these faith examples. Chapter 12 begins with the word therefore, and that word therefore really means there shouldn't be a chapter division there. They added that probably in a terrible location. But he says, therefore, based on all we've just talked about, we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, these witnesses being those from Hebrews 11. So, what do? Here's the exhortation. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares or trips us up, and let's run with the endurance, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, giving me the information that it is possible for you and for me to do this and to accomplish it. We can be successful. Exhortation is the idea of you can do it. Here's why we know we can do it. Let's do it. We can make it. And what a privilege it is that all areas of doctrine are covered within this one verse. Not all preaching will be pleasant, but not all preaching should be doom and gloom either. There's a balance in the diet. A balanced approach is required of gospel preaching. And he ends this verse by saying, with all long-suffering and doctrine. You make sure that your sermons are peppered with Scripture, peppered with doctrine and the truth, and you have some understanding of being long-suffering. Are people always going to be only as good as they're taught? That can very much be true. And so if you go somewhere and people have only ever been taught error their entire life, can you really expect them in 1 week to get everything? No. Jesus would say to his own disciples, I have a lot that I want to say to you, but you can't handle it yet. You're not able to bear it just yet. Well, if that's true for the disciples of Jesus who walked with him every day, would it not be even more true for those of us that don't have that privilege? And that sometimes I'll need to be patient with people. And I know what we mean when we do this, but sometimes someone will become a Christian and they'll come to church and they'll do something that we would consider to be less than Christ-like behavior. And the first step sometimes people will use is they'll go over and they'll rebuke them. I don't believe that's what that word long-suffering there means. I think there's a better approach to being able to go talk to that person and say, can we study a little bit further as you've just become a Christian, and you can then get to what is the problem and handle it in love and still teach them. Instead of driving people away, trying to do what we think is best, but not doing it in a long-suffering spirit. I have to have patience with people. And this is why. Verses 3 through 5 tells us the time's going to come when they won't endure sound doctrine. They'll turn away having itching ears. They just want to hear what sounds good. It's like a dog, just wants its ears scratched. And as long as you scratch that dog's ears, he's going to be happy with you. The moment you stop, you're going to get a death stare. You better pick back up, right? Or I'm going to be mad at you for the rest of the day. Sometimes people act that way when it comes to preaching. Tell me what I want to hear. You tell me what I don't want to hear, and I'm going to give you that sour look for the rest of the day. And we might take our business elsewhere. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Having itching ears, they'll heap up for themselves teachers. They'll turn away their ears from the truth and be turned aside to fables, what is not reality and truth. And he ends this section by saying, but you, Timothy, be watchful in all things. Endure afflictions. Do the work of an evangelist. Fulfill your ministry. Timothy is given all of this information, and it is with these 5 verses that I'm happy to tell you we're still trying to make those implemented in every single preaching student that we train. We want verse 5 to be able to be said of all of our students, but that comes with verses 1 through 4 first. And so as I tell you about the Memphis School of Preaching today, let me start with what a typical day looks like at MSOP. In the beginning of the day, we have 8:30 chapel. The bell will ring and everybody will stand, and one of our students, this is Drew Smith, he'll get up and he'll deliver a message in our morning chapel. Drew used to be an accountant, worked in the specified area of tax agency. And he was so interested in becoming a preacher, but he was in business with another business partner, and he said, I don't think he'll let me buy out of my deal. And I asked him, do you think your business partner would be classified as a religious man? He said, yes. And I said, do me a favor, call him, tell him what you're interested in doing, and see what he says. Well, sure enough, even though this man that was his partner is not a member of the church, he was impressed that a young man would want to preach for the rest of his living. He let him out of his contract without having to pay a penny. And Drew is now one of our best second-year students that we have. And I'm so thankful that he made that call. He used to be in the Christian church. He was a deacon in the Christian church until he started reading his Bible and realized that much of what he was being taught he couldn't find in the Scriptures. And now he's almost ready to graduate this June and become a gospel preacher, preaching the truth and trying to save other people with the gospel of Christ. What a privilege to have someone like that attend our school and be as dedicated as they are. Upon completion of that sermon, one of our instructors, this is Brother Kevin Rutherford here, he'll get up and offer some advice. Now, the word there is usually called critique. And sometimes people get upset about that. You critique these guys? What do you think LSU is dealing with today and tomorrow? You think that the coaches from LSU are going to put up some film from last night when Alabama trounced them and tell them, if you had done this, we wouldn't have lost like this. If you had made this, we would have been able to probably stop them from scoring. They will critique their performance, won't they? And other teams that lost will do that too. And even the teams that won. You know what Alabama's probably doing? We could have won by 56-13 if we had not done these things wrong. We don't try to be mean in our critique. We're genuinely trying to help. And so an instructor will say, I believe if you'd put this point before that other point, it will strengthen your sermon. If you add these scriptures to it, you'll strengthen your sermon. If you'll avoid some of these phrases and some of these wordings, you'll strengthen your sermon. And they give them that sheet of paper afterwards with all of that advice. They get to take it back to their dorm, their apartment, if you will, and they get to study it and they get to work on it and try to get better. It's the same thing that happens in every other field. After chapel, they go to class from 9 until noon, where they study typically homiletics, English, Greek, different subject matters along those lines. Around 11 a.m., they start their first Bible class of the day, where they're studying a book of the Bible. And then that continues on after lunch. There's another evening period of chapel for 5 minutes. They sing 2 songs. They have a prayer. They go back to work. They then have class from 1 until 4. And they rinse, lather, repeat the next day. Monday through Friday, that's how they get to spend their time. And we're thankful that we have so many that are interested in wanting to do that. And I do want to stress this too. I'm not here today to tell you that the Memphis School of Preaching is the only school of preaching that is faithfully trying to train gospel preachers. There are numerous schools that are diligently doing that. However, they don't pay my bills. And the one that pays my bills is the one I'm paid to talk about. And so I'm here to tell you about MSOP. But I'm also an alma mater with MSOP. I'm an alumnus of the school, and I value very much what they offered to me and gave me during my 2 years. But I'm grateful for any faithful school of preaching. As you and I consider the school itself, I want to show you the faculty. Some of these names you'll be very familiar with. I know you know the director, B.J. Clarke. I normally just call him Dad. But this is B.J. Clarke. He's been our director for almost 12 years now. January, he'll begin his 12th year, and we're thankful for that. Brother Billy Bland has served as his associate director that entirety of the time that he's been director of the school. Brother Bobby Liddell is an administrative dean. Brother Keith Mosier Sr. works as our dean of academics, and Brother Mosier is also our longest tenured faculty member right now. Dean of apologetics is Brother Dan Cates. Brother Kevin Rutherford, who I showed you earlier, he's our dean of admissions. I work directly with him as recruiter. He's involved in the actual admissions process. Then we have instructors at the school. Alan Webster, I know, is not a strange name to hear. He's done multiple writings and articles with House to House, Heart to Heart, Polishing the Pulpit. Scott Kane is our preacher at Forest Hill, the congregation that oversees the school, and he's one of our instructors as well. Then we have Brother Mike McDaniel, host of A Bible Answer, which is filmed in Murray, Kentucky, and Cliff Goodwin, who is one of our instructors who works specifically with the Miracles and Parables quarter in the summer school. And our students raved about what he did for those 2 weeks, and they were so sad to see him go back to local work until the next summer that he teaches, which is, Lord willing, this upcoming summer. The school has over 400 years of local work experience combined with these men. What we mean by that is that all of their local work, if you added it up together, you get to 400 years total. And we're thankful that that's the case because it gives our students the opportunity when they have a question to ask men who have been there, done that, and if you will, bought the t-shirt, and even returned it to get a different size. They know what to do and what not to do. Many times our instructors will say to our students, we did this, don't do it. It did not work out. I caution you not to do that. We learned our lesson. It might sound like a good idea, but it's not. They may say, this is what we did and it gave us great success. And they're willing to take any question at any time, including from our alumni. Several students that graduate and become a part of our alumni association still call and ask for advice, and our instructors are more than happy to give it to them. These men care about making successful gospel preachers, and so they'll work with you in any way that they can. The school costs no tuition. It's tuition free. We're not an accredited school, and what we mean by that is we're privileged to not be told what to teach or what books to teach from. We have no plans to become accredited. We're doing just fine with the ability to preach what God gave us as our assigned textbook, and we're grateful that we don't have anybody stepping in and telling us otherwise. Usually that's when problems come about, and there have been plenty of people that we've talked to that have said, don't go the accreditation route, it was a mistake. And so we're thankful that we don't have those problems coming our way. And so a student is privileged to come to the school and attend with the opportunity of being debt-free after their 2 years are over from school purposes because of congregations and individuals who are dedicated to sending support to basically fund their way as a missionary, if you will, for 2 years. They'd basically operate under the same category, but they have the ability to not worry about their bills and finances. And there are times where people ask the question, how does that work? Do you have enough support? Are the students okay? When I was in school, I lost a large amount of money one morning. I saw the letter in my box. I thought, great, my lunch hour today is going to be spent calling churches and trying to raise that money back. As I was heading to lunch, I thought I'll stop by my box again. And I went and I grabbed another letter out of the box, and it said, we found the money you're missing, don't worry about it. Another congregation had sent funds for students that needed it, and they were able to make it as if the money never left. And so what a blessing to have so many people that are dedicated in helping preaching students. Money has never been an issue for someone to not attend MSOP. We've always been able to help our students be fully funded. We've had some show up without any support on their first day. By the end of their first day, they're fully funded. And we help our students with whatever they need while we raise support for them if they ever lose some, and we're trying to move things around. We don't let them go hungry. If you can't tell from looking at me that I don't go hungry and I work for the school, our students don't go hungry either, okay? I promise you. We're doing all right. And we're blessed and privileged to have so many churches and individuals who love what we're doing enough to send their hard-earned money to support us. Now, we have several programs that happen throughout the time of the school. We just started this one. It's our graduate program. It's designed for graduates of MSOP or other preaching schools that would like to come and take one of our 4 classes of study that we offer. We offer apologetics, leadership, broadcasting and communications, and world missions. And so we try to give a concerted and a pointed view into those 4 areas, helping students learn more about those specific fields with assignments tailored to those areas of study. This is something that, yet again, would be a good thing for any young man who maybe graduated from a school, was preaching for a while, and then maybe things just didn't work out. Maybe he had a rough time and he's looking for a reset. This would be a great thing for him to come and do. And we would be happy to have him, and we could help him also open up with some more contacts that may not be available to him at that particular time. And so right now we've got about 4 students in the graduate program, and we're grateful for that. We also have a MOST program. Now, this is not the 2-year program. It's designed for people who cannot attend. They're physically unable to make it for 2 years. After this particular quarter is over, we will have covered the whole Bible through the MOST program. It meets on Thursdays, both in person and online, though I doubt any of you want to drive all the way on Thursdays to be there in person. You're welcome to go to our website, msop.org, and search under the programs for MOST and watch all of the classes for free on our website. And we're grateful for that. And by the way, if there are young men who are in school, maybe homeschooled, and they're thinking about going to preaching school, they can take this as well as part of their curriculum, and it would be something that you'd be able to use on their, transcript, if you will, their high school diploma of their grades, and be able to make them eligible for graduation based on the homeschool rules. And so the MOST program is great for that as well. This is the Scattered Abroad Network. I serve also as the director of operations of this. We just last year, November, we're almost to, actually it is November, this is a full year now. Wow, time flies. We've been with MSOP now for a full year. We just reached yesterday 255,000 downloads on Scattered Abroad, and we're almost done with an app. If you don't know what Scattered Abroad is, it's a podcast network. If you don't know what a podcast is, it's a radio program. That's all it is. It's just a new name for it. There's really nothing new under the sun, but we've been calling podcasts this great new trend. It's just radio. It's just a different way to get a radio program out. We have programs that come out on Scattered Abroad every single day of the month, and we're thankful that we have that. Some of them are programs that are from yesteryear. We have a particular podcast called Days Gone By. Days Gone By is where we ask congregations who may have tons of cassette tapes and they don't know what to do with them, give them to us, we'll digitize them. We'll gladly send you back the files that we were able to digitize, and then we'll air them and give credit for where they came from, giving the information of the congregation, and have the way to make some of these sermons come back to life. We have sermons from men like Guyan Woods, Thomas B. Warren, Batsell Barrett Baxter, and many other names that are familiar to some of us older members here today, but not so much to the younger. Well, those men preached great sermons, and they need to be continuing to speak even though they've gone on to their reward. I think that's written in the Bible somewhere, don't you, about Abel? He being dead yet speaketh. And I'm grateful that we have the chance to let these men still preach through modern technology. You can find us on all major podcast platforms, as well as our YouTube channel, and also you can find us by going to Facebook and Instagram and typing in Scattered Abroad Network. We have a wives program as well that meets on Monday nights. This is designed for women who are interested in learning more about what the Bible teaches about what a preacher's wife's role would be in a congregation, and they have at the school women who have been there and done that as preacher wives, and they stand and teach our great young group of wives that are there, and they equip them for the future work that will happen where they're going to be attending. My wife will tell you that when she and I first got to our local work, one of them said, "Hey, we need you to throw a banquet for our sweethearts here." Well, she already knew how to do that because the wives are trained in doing that very thing during the 2 years. And other events that happen, she already knew how to do because my wife was taught how to make visual aids and how to teach and how to do other things that are naturally asked of so many preacher wives. And so we try to do the best we can to equip our preacher wives in the wives program. We have the library as well, and one of the things that I love about the library is, this is the N.B. Hardeman Library. About 4 years ago now, almost 5, when the pandemic was raging, there was a Bible History Museum in Collierville, Tennessee, about 10 minutes away from the school. They had to shut their doors. And when that happened, they called 5 major universities, in their books at least is what they told us, and they asked if they would be willing to take some of the artifacts that are both real and some that are replicas. Among those, they called, I believe, the University of Tennessee, University of Memphis, the Tigers, and they also called the Florida Gators, and they called the Memphis School of Preaching. And so we have on our premises now, this picture here on the right is essentially what you would call a hall pass. Back when they were coming back from captivity, the Hebrews had to have something like this on them so that if they were stopped and questioned, they could present this to them and they could read it, and it would be an official decree from the king saying they're allowed to be going home. And we have stuff like this. You can see in the back there, there's another case of stuff. There's a ton of things that we have in our display cases now, one of which is an authentic Hebrew Torah scroll. And it is an impressive sight to see. It is massive. And we're grateful that we have so many of these things now at our disposal. Another thing that we have is a studio. This is what the studio looked like when I was a student, and we were just getting our feet wet. We had been donated some equipment from Jay, Florida, the congregation there, and they donated us several thousands of dollars of equipment that was about 5 years old. Well, that was over 10 years ago, and typically audio-video equipment like that doesn't last forever. We got as much out of it as we possibly could, but it was time for a rebrand because we do have a radio station on msop.org/radio powered by Truth FM. Y'all know all about Truth FM. I know I saw it on the slide earlier. And then on the Scattered Abroad Network, we have the Students of the Word podcast. And this is what the studio looked like just a few years ago. That's the same wall from the picture before, by the way, the same area. So we updated for podcasting and tried to make that a little easier and train our students in being eligible to get back into the local work and say, I know how to start a podcast now. And then several donors came and helped us redesign the studio. And so now we have the privilege of having a state-of-the-art studio that our students are trained in. They're taught how to do formal broadcasting, how to do just laid-back podcasting. They're also given the chance when congregations say, we want a sermon for you to be able to send our way as we're considering hiring a new preacher. They could use the studio to record that if they can't make it there and back in time. And so we're blessed to have had the studio come our way. I know it's a bit of a drive to get to Memphis. I understand that. But you can do this online too. Our lectureship is coming up March 30th through April the 3rd, 2025. This past theme of this past lectureship this year was Righteousness Exalts a Nation. And certainly there's a lot of that needs to be taught in our country even after an election. There still needs to be taught righteousness, right? We still need to be looking at that. Well, it doesn't do any good for you to say righteousness exalts a nation if you and I won't be willing to teach all nations what righteousness looks like. And so we're looking forward to covering our 58th annual lectureship theme this upcoming March through April the 3rd on 2025. If you do want to make the trip down and you have an RV, we do have RV hookups available if you'll call ahead and reserve that. But you do want to call ahead and reserve that because they go fast. And so if you'd like to make the trip down, we'd be happy to have you. But I understand if you'd rather just watch online. You'll be able to watch through our website and our YouTube. Foundations is a program that we have that was started back in 2008. Brother Bobby Liddell wanted to have a young men and women's training camp. And so this picture from one of our recent years of Foundations, we have almost an average of 160 children, teenagers I should say. They probably wouldn't like being called children. 160 teens that come every year for this camp, and we have the ability to train them and what it means to be a preacher. Or in the ladies section, we train them in what it means to be a spiritual leader in their own right, how they can do that with things that are able for them to be able to accomplish. And so we have so many different things that happen throughout that week. This is a typical night where we get together and have some singing and a devotional. And this is always a difficult picture for me to put up now because I don't look anything like that guy on the left anymore. That is me, though, if you can believe it. That is Caden and Brennan Mallory and myself. They were in my apartment as Foundations campers. And then the picture on the right, when I got a little bit closer to what I look like now, Caden and Brennan, their brother Camp, and then Justin, who's on the far end there, all but Camp have now attended and graduated the Memphis School of Preaching. Camp, Lord willing, is just about 3 years away from attending. And they were all in my apartment, and I'm very proud of each of them. Those three that have graduated are excellent young men, great gospel preachers, and I'm excited to see what they're able to accomplish. Degree completion is something that we have, and I'm trying to hurry here, but I want to just cover this real quick, and then I've got just some pictures at the end. If you come through Memphis School of Preaching before college, we have ways to save you a lot of money. If you come through MSOP as a young man before college, you can enter Freed-Hardeman as a junior, and that saves you 2 years of college tuition that you have to worry about. If you go to Amridge University, where I got my bachelor's and master's, you can go for about $200 a month, and you can also attend Faulkner and Heritage University at minimum cost. And so as we think about an economy that is struggling, even though we would hope that in the next 4 or 10 years, whatever, we'll be able to have a better economy, still wise to save money, right? And we can help them do that by attending us first. Also giving them a verse-by-verse education instead of just big picture. Nothing against any college, but all of my classes in the Bible in college, they never went verse by verse. They just didn't have time. We have these apartment buildings. There's 4 of them, and we are able to house all of our students. In fact, these apartments are designed to be an easy, short distance walk from the school to the apartments. They're on the same parking lot, and they save you an average as a single student, an average of $1,500 a month by staying on campus with us. And as a married couple, an average of about $1,200 to $1,300 a month. Utilities are included and covered in the cost of your rent. Basically, that's all you're paying for as a student in rent is just utilities. We're privileged to have these apartment buildings on campus. Here's what I want to close and say as we bring this to an end. If Paul were writing to our students today, would he say anything different from what he said to Timothy? No. You mean even after all that's changed and all the climate, differences that are in existence now with people's backgrounds and nationalities and the civil unrest, he wouldn't change a thing? No, he wouldn't change a thing. This still works if we'll let it. And I know, unfortunately, though I would love to say the opposite, not every single man pictured up there is still always going to say that they're faithful gospel preachers. Some have left, like Demas. Some have gone on to their reward. Some are just not preaching anymore, but they're still faithfully attending. But right now we have 42 students at MSOP. And these 42 men, as they study the next 2 years, and some of them get ready to graduate this upcoming Father's Day, what difference can be made in the next 30 to 40 years by these men right here if they'll faithfully follow what this book teaches and they'll preach and teach the truth? How much of a difference has been made in your life by a gospel preacher who's done just that? By an eldership who's been faithful in upholding what this book teaches? And so our recommendation to any man who's interested in a greater understanding of the Bible, they may say, I don't want to preach. Well, an elder's not a preacher, but he still can preach. He can teach. And anytime you're doing what we're doing together today or every Sunday, it's preaching the truth. And so we're looking for better deacons and elders to continue to be studying and learning. And wouldn't it be great if you could have an eldership that has men on there that have gone through a preaching school, that have learned? Absolutely. And here's the final thing I'll say, because it's the truth. We used to just say our slogan was preach the word. We've kind of changed it just a little bit and tweaked it because we believe the Bible teaches that if you and I will preach the word, we can change the world for the better. What happens in the next 4 years is not determined only by what happens when a new president is inaugurated. What happens in the next 4 years is determined also by what you and I do in our community, by what you and I are doing house to house and heart to heart. And if we can have more men out there faithfully preaching the truth, how could that be a problem? Thank you so much for the time and the opportunity to be with you for this class. I'm looking forward to worshiping together in just a few moments. Thank you so much.